Arizona Territory, 1880. The unforgiving sun beat down on the dusty town of Copper Springs like God's own judgment, baking the earth and testing the resolve of even the hardiest souls. Here on the frontier, a body learned quick that sentiment was a luxury few could afford and none could sustain. At least that's what Liam Prescott had come to believe during his 24 years of life. Liam adjusted his Stetson lower over his eyes as he guided his buckskin gelding down the main street. At his age, most men were just finding their footing, but the harsh realities of frontier life had forced him to grow up fast. His lean frame carried the strength earned from long days working cattle, though his face retained a youthfulness that belied the wariness in his blue eyes. A light stubble shadowed his jaw, the only concession to his weeks on the trail. "No room for anything soft out here," he muttered to himself, a mantra he'd adopted after watching his father's dreams crumble beneath the weight of drought and debt. The lesson had been burned into him: attachments were dangerous. In the West, a man survived by keeping his distance, staying mobile, and trusting no one but himself. Love was a distraction that got people killed. Better to drift from ranch to ranch, taking work where he could find it, moving on before anyone got close enough to matter. He'd arrived in Copper Springs on the promise of work at the Circle P Ranch. With luck, he'd earn enough to keep moving north, away from the memories that haunted him. The town itself was like dozens of others he'd passed through, a single street lined with false-fronted buildings, a saloon doing the liveliest business, and the inevitable church standing in judgment of it all. What Liam didn't expect to see was the young woman struggling with a heavy crate outside the general store. At 22, Madeleine Radcliffe stood out in the dusty thoroughfare like a wildflower in a desert. Her chestnut hair was pulled back in a practical bun, though errant strands had escaped to frame her face. Her calico dress, though simple and worn at the edges, couldn't disguise her natural grace. What caught Liam's attention, however, was the determined set of her jaw as she fought to maintain her grip on the unwieldy load. Without thinking, Liam dismounted and approached. "Ma'am, let me help you with that." Madeleine looked up, startled. For a moment, wariness flickered across her features. A woman alone learned caution quickly in frontier towns, but something in the young cowboy's expression must have reassured her. "Thank you, but I can manage." Her voice carried a quiet dignity, though strain showed in the tightness around her eyes. "No doubt you can," Liam replied, "but my mother would haunt me from beyond if I rode past a lady struggling." He kept his distance, hat in hand, respecting her space while still offering assistance. After a moment's hesitation, Madeleine relented. "Very well, it goes to the counter inside." As Liam lifted the crate, he noticed the gold band on her left hand, worn thin but unmistakable. A married woman, then. He felt a peculiar mix of relief and disappointment. Relief because it reinforced his boundary: she was spoken for, therefore safely outside his concern. Disappointment for reasons he refused to examine. Inside the store, the proprietor, a balding man with spectacles perched precariously on his nose, looked up. "Mrs. Radcliffe, I told you to wait for my boy to help with that delivery." "Your boy is 13 and skinny as a rail, mister." "Haskins," she replied with practiced patience. "Besides, this gentleman offered his assistance." Liam set down the crate, noticing the weariness that seemed to settle over the young woman once they were indoors. There was something about her, a sadness perhaps, or a burden she carried that went beyond physical exhaustion. "New in town?" Haskins asked, eyeing Liam with the curiosity of a man who trafficked in gossip as much as goods. "Just passing through, heard the Circle P was hiring." At this, both Haskins and Madeleine exchanged glances. "Circle P belongs to the widow Radcliffe here," Haskins said, nodding toward Madeleine. "Since Thomas passed last winter, she's been trying to keep it running, but—" "But I am managing quite well," Madeleine interrupted firmly. "And yes, Mr. Haskins is correct. I own the Circle P and I am looking for hands." She straightened her shoulders, studying Liam with new interest. "Do you have experience with cattle, Mr. Prescott?" "Liam Prescott." "Yes, ma'am, 5 years working herds from Texas to Colorado." Her eyes, deep brown and too serious for someone so young, assessed him. "Can you start tomorrow?" The revelation struck Liam like a physical blow. This slip of a woman was the ranch owner, a widow no less, trying to run a cattle operation alone. His instinct was to decline. Getting entangled in someone else's struggles was precisely what he avoided. Especially a widow's struggles, they were bottomless pits that could swallow a man whole if he wasn't careful, yet something in her steady gaze challenged him. This wasn't a damsel seeking rescue but a woman fighting for survival on her own terms. "Yes, ma'am, I can start at first light." That night in the sparse room above the saloon, Liam questioned his decision. The widow Radcliffe represented everything he avoided: complications, responsibilities, the messy business of other people's lives. He should ride out at dawn, find work elsewhere. The West was vast, with plenty of opportunities for a man determined to keep moving. But when morning came, he found himself riding out to the Circle P, drawn by something he couldn't name or perhaps refused to. The ranch itself told a story of both promise and neglect. Good land, decent buildings, but signs of a property stretched thin without enough hands to maintain it. The corral fence needed mending, the barn roof had patches that wouldn't last another rainy season, and the cattle in the nearby pasture, though healthy enough, were fewer than a ranch this size should support. Madeleine greeted him from the porch of the modest ranch house, dressed practically in a simple blouse and riding skirt, her hair now braided down her back. Beside her stood an older man with a weathered face and a permanent squint. "Mr. Prescott, welcome to Circle P. This is Silas Jenkins, my foreman." Silas gave a curt nod, his expression making it clear that he reserved judgment on newcomers until they proved their worth. "We'll start you with the North Herd," Madeleine continued. "We lost several head to rustlers last month, and I need someone to reinforce the boundary there." "Rustlers," Liam's hand instinctively moved to the revolver at his hip. "Have you notified the marshal?" A shadow crossed her face. "Marshal Blackburn has limited resources. He suggested I hire more hands or sell the ranch." "Selling seems the sensible choice for a woman alone," Liam observed, immediately regretting his words as her expression hardened. "This land was my husband's dream, Mr. Prescott. It will be my son's inheritance when he comes of age." "Your son," Liam hadn't seen any children. "James is back east with my sister, attending school." Her voice softened slightly. "He's 10, old enough to learn, too young to work a ranch. When the operation is stable again, he'll return." The picture became clearer, not just a widow struggling with a ranch, but a mother fighting for her child's future. The complications multiplied. "Mrs. Radcliffe," Liam began carefully, "running cattle takes more than determination. It takes manpower, resources." "Are you declining the position, Mr. Prescott?" Her chin lifted slightly. Liam looked at the ranch, at the proud set of her shoulders, at the challenge in her eyes. Everything in him said to walk away. This woman carried too many burdens: a widow's grief, a mother's responsibility, a rancher's struggle. Getting involved meant getting attached, and attachment was the quicksand that swallowed dreams on the frontier. "No, ma'am," he heard himself say, "I'm accepting it." The weeks that followed fell into a rhythm. Liam worked from sunrise to sunset, repairing fences, tending cattle, tracking down strays. Silas proved to be a fountain of knowledge about the local terrain, though he remained taciturn. Two other hands, brothers named Carter and Davis Wilson, rounded out the small crew, capable men but not enough for a property this size. Madeleine was everywhere, checking cattle, keeping books, negotiating with suppliers. She rode as well as any man, handled a rifle with confidence, and never asked her hands to do what she wouldn't. Yet Liam noticed how she sometimes paused at the edge of the property, gazing toward the distant mountains with a loneliness that struck him as familiar. One evening, as Liam repaired tack in the barn, Madeleine appeared with a lantern. "The men say you tracked those strays all the way to Eagle Canyon," she said. "That's difficult country." Liam shrugged. "Just doing my job." "No," she corrected quietly. "You're doing more than that. Most hands would have given them up for lost." The lantern light softened her features, highlighting the delicate curve of her cheek, the quiet strength in her eyes. For the first time, Liam allowed himself to truly see her, not as the widow Radcliffe, but as Madeleine, a young woman carrying burdens that would crush most men. "Why are you really here, Mr. Prescott?" she asked suddenly. "A man with your skills could find easier work with better pay." The question caught him off guard. "I go where the work takes me. Always moving, never settling." It wasn't a question but an observation, running towards something or away from it. Their eyes met across the dim space, and for a moment Liam felt exposed, as if she could see through the carefully constructed walls he'd built around himself. "Some things aren't worth staying for," he finally said, "and some things are." Her gaze never wavered. "My husband believed that, this land, this legacy for our son, it's worth the struggle. Even if it breaks you." Especially then, she set the lantern down. "Strength isn't about avoiding breaks, Mr. Prescott. It's about what you build from the pieces." She left him then, her words lingering in the dusty air of the barn. Liam returned to his work, trying to ignore the uncomfortable feeling that she had somehow seen the truth he kept buried, that his wandering wasn't freedom but fear. Fear of putting down roots only to have them torn up, of caring only to lose, of building only to watch it crumble. The incident that changed everything came a week later. Liam was checking fencing in the far pasture when he heard gunshots. Drawing his revolver, he urged his horse toward the sound, cresting a rise to see Madeleine pinned behind a boulder exchanging fire with 3 men attempting to drive off a small herd of Circle P cattle. Without hesitation, Liam spurred his horse forward, firing warning shots that scattered the rustlers temporarily. He reached Madeleine's position as the men regrouped. "Are you hit?" he demanded, sliding from his horse to take cover beside her. No, her face was pale but composed, her hands steady on her rifle. "They came out of nowhere. I was checking the stream when I spotted them. Mrs. Radcliffe, when I give the word, mount up and ride for the house." "I will not abandon my cattle," she replied fiercely. "You won't help your cattle or your son by catching a bullet," Liam countered, risking a glance over the boulder. The rustlers were spreading out, trying to flank their position. Something in his words reached her. "Very well, but you'll follow." "Right behind you." It was a lie, and from her expression she knew it. "No, Mr. Prescott, together or not at all." Before Liam could argue further, the rustlers opened fire again, bullets chipping stone around them. Madeleine returned fire with surprising accuracy, forcing one man to scramble for better cover. Liam realized they were at an impasse. He wouldn't leave her, and she wouldn't leave him. The stubborn woman would get them both killed with her misplaced loyalty. "On 3, he conceded, "we'll make for those trees and circle back." They moved together, providing covering fire for each other, retreating strategically toward the tree line. The rustlers, realizing their quarry was escaping, mounted a pursuit. As Liam and Madeleine reached their horses, a shot cracked past, too close. Madeleine gasped, clutching her arm. "Just a graze," she insisted as Liam pulled her behind a fallen log. Blood seeped between her fingers, but she was right. The bullet had only grazed her upper arm. Still, the sight of her blood ignited something primal in Liam. Without thinking, he tore a strip from his shirt, binding the wound quickly. "This changes things," he said grimly. "Stay here." Before she could protest, he was moving, using the trees for cover as he circled behind the rustlers. He'd learned long ago that the best defense was a swift, decisive offense. 3 against 1 wasn't good odds, but surprise was on his side. The ensuing firefight was brief but intense. Liam's first shot caught the nearest rustler in the shoulder, spinning him off his feet. The other 2 split up, forcing Liam to divide his attention. A bullet splintered the tree beside his head, showering him with bark. Suddenly, from a different angle, another shot rang out. One of the rustlers cried out, dropping his weapon. Madeleine had disobeyed his order, positioning herself to provide supporting fire. Their eyes met across the clearing in a moment of perfect understanding. They were stronger together than apart. The remaining rustler, seeing his companions down and himself outflanked, made a desperate break for his horse. Liam's shot went wide, but Madeleine's found its mark, striking the man's leg. He fell, cursing. In the aftermath, as they bound the rustler's wounds and secured them for transport to town, Liam found himself looking at Madeleine with new eyes. She wasn't just surviving the frontier, she was mastering it on her own terms. "You should have stayed behind cover," he admonished softly as he checked her injury again. "And you should know by now that I don't abandon my people." She winced as he tightened the makeshift bandage. "The Circle P takes care of its own." Her words struck him with unexpected force. How long had it been since he'd belonged anywhere, since he'd been someone's own? "I'm just a hired hand, Mrs. Radcliffe." She studied him, her expression unreadable in the fading light. Is that all you want to be, Mr. Prescott? A man who passes through lives like a shadow, leaving no trace." The question hung between them, demanding an answer he wasn't ready to give. The rustlers' capture changed things at the Circle P. Marshal Blackburn, confronted with evidence he couldn't ignore, finally took action against the gang that had been plaguing local ranches. With the immediate threat diminished, Liam found fewer excuses to extend his stay. Yet each morning he rose with the sun and went about his duties, telling himself it was just until the next stage of repairs was complete, just until after the cattle drive to the railhead, just until Madeleine's arm fully healed. Excuses that grew thinner as weeks stretched into months. He learned more about her in that time. How Thomas Radcliffe had brought her west as a young bride of 18, full of dreams about building an empire from raw land. How they'd weathered drought and disease and debt together, only for Thomas to die from a fever that swept through the territory. How she'd sent their son east not just for education but for safety, a decision that tore at her daily. And she learned about him pieces he hadn't meant to reveal, about the father who'd lost everything chasing dreams too big for his reach, about the mother who'd withered away from heartbreak, about the young man who'd vowed never to be trapped by hope or crippled by loss. The cattle drive to the railhead proved decisive. For 5 days they moved the herd across difficult terrain, fighting exhaustion and the elements. On the third night, as they camped beneath a sky ablaze with stars, Madeleine joined Liam at the edge of the firelight. "Silas says we'll make good time tomorrow if the weather holds," she said, settling beside him with a cup of coffee. "He knows this country better than anyone." Liam kept his eyes on the herd, grazing peacefully in the moonlight. "He's getting old, though, talks of retiring next spring." She paused. "I'll need someone to take his place." Liam felt his heart quicken despite himself. "You'll find someone suitable." "I believe I already have." She turned to face him fully. "The men respect you. You know cattle, you know the land, and you've proven your loyalty to Circle P." "Mrs. Radcliffe." "Madeleine," she interrupted, "after all we've been through, I think you've earned the right to use my name." "Madeleine," he conceded, the name feeling both foreign and right on his tongue. "I'm not the staying kind." "Because you're afraid," she said simply, "not of the work or the responsibility, but of caring too much, of building something that could be lost." Her perception unnerved him. "And what would you know about that?" "Everything." Her voice softened. "I lost the man I loved, sent away my child, and face losing my home daily, yet here I stand." "That's different. This land is your husband's legacy." "This land is my choice," she corrected firmly. "Every morning I choose to fight for it, not just because Thomas loved it or because it's James's inheritance, but because it's mine now. My struggle, my home." In the firelight, with her face animated by conviction, she was breathtaking. Liam felt something inside him shift, like ground giving way beneath his feet. "What are you really asking me, Madeleine?" "To consider that running isn't freedom, that permanence isn't weakness." She hesitated. "To stay, not just as foreman, but as a man who might someday want more than endless horizons." The implication hung between them, too fragile to grasp, too significant to ignore. "I can't replace him," Liam said quietly. "I'm not asking you to." She stood, brushing dust from her skirt. "I'm asking you to be yourself, a good man who spent too long believing he doesn't deserve to belong anywhere." She left him then, returning to the campfire, where the other hands were settling in for the night. Liam remained alone with the stars and the cattle and the unsettling feeling that she'd seen through every defense he'd ever built. The return from the cattle drive brought new challenges. News awaited them that the Eastern Bank holding the ranch's mortgage had been purchased by Western Territorial Investments, a company known for foreclosing on properties to consolidate them for wealthy Eastern investors. "They've reduced the terms," Madeleine explained to Liam in the ranch office, her face drawn with worry. "The full amount is due in 3 months or they claim the property." Liam studied the paperwork, anger rising. "This can't be legal." "It's technically within their rights. The original loan had provisions for renegotiation upon change of ownership." She pressed her fingers to her temples. "I should have had a lawyer review everything after Thomas died, but there was so much happening." "How much are we short?" She named a figure that made Liam wince. Even with the successful cattle sale, it was beyond their reach. "I could sell the east pasture," she mused. "It's the least productive section." "And cripple your future operations," Liam countered. There has to be another way. For days, they explored options, additional loans impossible with the bank's hostile position, selling off equipment, a temporary solution that would cripple operations, appealing to the territorial government too slow to help in time. The pressure revealed new dimensions to their relationship. Liam found himself staying late in the office, poring over accounts with Madeleine. They argued strategies, commiserated over setbacks, celebrated small victories. Without either acknowledging it, the line between employer and employee blurred, replaced by something closer to partnership. One evening, as they worked by lamplight, Madeleine shared a letter from her son. "James asks when he can come home," she said softly. "He misses the open spaces. The school in Boston is excellent, but he feels confined there." Liam studied the childish handwriting, something tightening in his chest at the boy's innocent longing for home. "He sounds like a fine young man." "He is," pride and sadness mingled in her voice. So much like his father, determined, idealistic, Thomas would have known how to save this place. "You're doing everything possible," Liam assured her. "More than most men would manage. But it may not be enough." Her composure slipped for just a moment, revealing the fear she usually kept hidden. "What do I tell my son if I lose his birthright?" Without thinking, Liam reached across the table, covering her hand with his own. "You tell him his mother fought with every ounce of her strength, and that's what matters." Their eyes met across the lamplight, and something shifted between them, an acknowledgement of feelings that had been growing beneath the surface of their daily interactions. Madeleine turned her hand beneath his, their fingers intertwining in a gesture that felt both innocent and profound. The moment was broken by a knock at the door. Silas entered, his expression grave. "Riders coming in," he reported. "Looks like Wheeler and some of his men." Gerald Wheeler was the local representative for Western Territorial Investments, a former rancher who'd sold out to become the company's agent in acquiring distressed properties. His arrival boded ill. "Show them in," Madeleine said, withdrawing her hand from Liam's and straightening her papers. The vulnerable woman of moments ago vanished, replaced by the composed ranch owner. Wheeler entered like a man who believed he already owned the place, hat in hand but swagger intact. Two men flanked him, one a clerk with a portfolio, the other a hired gun whose eyes constantly scanned the room. "Mrs. Radcliffe," Wheeler greeted, his smile not reaching his eyes. "Working late, I see. Admirable but unnecessary, given the circumstances." "The circumstances being your company's attempt to steal my property through manipulated loan terms," Madeleine replied coolly. Wheeler's smile tightened. "Business, Mrs. Radcliffe, nothing personal. I've come with an offer that might ease your situation." "I'm listening." "Western Territorial is prepared to buy your mortgage outright, today, for a fair price. You'd walk away with enough to start fresh elsewhere, perhaps somewhere more suitable for a woman alone." Liam felt his hand tighten on the back of Madeleine's chair. Wheeler barely spared him a glance, just another ranch hand beneath notice. "I appreciate your concern for my welfare," Madeleine said, her tone suggesting precisely the opposite, "but Circle P is not for sale." Wheeler's false congeniality slipped. "Be reasonable, woman. You're facing foreclosure in 3 months. Western Territorial gets what it wants, if not through purchase, then by claiming defaulted properties." "Then I'll see you in 3 months, Mr. Wheeler. Now, if you'll excuse us, we have work to continue." After Wheeler departed with thinly veiled threats about reconsidering while the offer stands, Liam found himself both admiring Madeleine's spine and fearing for her future. "You realize he'll make things worse now," Liam said quietly. "Men like that don't take rejection well." "I'm aware," she gathered the scattered papers with steady hands, "but I meant what I said to you before. This is my choice, to fight until I can't fight anymore." Her words resonated with something deep in Liam, a truth he'd been avoiding since his arrival at Circle P. This woman, with her quiet determination and unwavering courage, had awakened parts of him he'd thought long dead, the desire to stand and fight, to build rather than flee, to care deeply enough that the risk of loss became bearable. Wheeler's visit proved prophetic. Within days, accidents began plaguing Circle P, a broken irrigation ditch that flooded valuable grazing land, cattle mysteriously breaking through previously sound fencing, a small fire in the hay barn caught just in time. Liam organized the hands into round-the-clock patrols, but they were too few to cover the vast property effectively. The campaign of sabotage continued, each incident designed to devalue the ranch or force them to divert precious resources to repairs. The situation came to a head one afternoon when Liam, returning from the far pasture, spotted smoke rising from the direction of the ranch house. Spurring his horse to a gallop, his heart hammering with fear for Madeleine, he arrived to find the kitchen engulfed in flames and no sign of help. Without hesitation, he burst through the front door. Madeleine. Smoke filled the main room, stinging his eyes and burning his lungs. He dropped to his knees, crawling toward the kitchen where the fire blazed fiercest. Liam, her voice came from upstairs, followed by a violent coughing fit. He found her in the office, struggling to gather ledgers and papers into a satchel, the smoke already thick around her. "Leave it," he shouted, grabbing her arm. "The deeds, the loan papers," she fought him, her face streaked with soot, eyes streaming. "They're not worth your life," he physically lifted her away from the desk. "The back stairs are still clear." As they reached the bottom of the rear staircase, a burning beam crashed down, blocking their exit. Liam shielded Madeleine with his body, feeling the scorching heat through his shirt. "The window," she gasped, pointing to a small side window that opened onto the porch roof. Together they forced it open, and Liam helped Madeleine through first, then followed. The roof creaked beneath them, already compromised by the fire spreading through the structure. "Jump," Liam urged as they reached the edge. "I'll be right behind you." She hesitated only a moment before leaping to the ground below. Liam followed, landing heavily beside her just as Silas and the Wilson brothers arrived with buckets and a pump from the well. For hours they fought the blaze, joined by neighbors who'd seen the smoke. By nightfall, they'd saved the outer structure of the house, though the interior was gutted. As they stood amid the smoking ruins, exhausted and soot-covered, Madeleine's face reflected the devastation Liam felt. "This wasn't an accident," she said quietly, surveying what remained of her home. "No," Liam agreed grimly, "but Wheeler's men were careful, no witnesses, nothing to prove it wasn't a kitchen fire gone wrong." She nodded, her expression hardening. "He thinks this will break me, make me desperate enough to sell." "Will it?" Liam asked gently, her eyes met his, fierce despite her exhaustion. "Never." That night, with the ranch house uninhabitable, Madeleine took shelter in the foreman's cabin, while Silas bunked with the hands. Liam brought her a plate of the simple stew the men had prepared and found her sitting on the small porch, staring at the damaged shell of her home. "You should eat," he said, offering the plate. "It's been a long day." She accepted it without argument, another sign of her fatigue. "Thank you for everything." Liam settled beside her on the step. "Wheeler will come tomorrow, offering to buy what's left at an even lower price." "I know," she picked at the food without enthusiasm. "And if you refuse?" "More accidents, I imagine, until nothing remains worth fighting for." The defeat in her voice cut him deeply. "Madeleine, look at me." She raised her eyes to his, and in the moonlight, he could see the struggle between her natural resilience and the weight of accumulated hardship. "You told me once that strength isn't about avoiding breaks, but what you build from the pieces," he reminded her. "Did you mean that?" "Yes," the word was barely audible. "Then let's build. Together." She studied him, confusion giving way to understanding. "What are you saying, Liam?" "I'm saying I'm tired of running from what matters, tired of protecting myself from loss by never risking attachment." He took a breath, stepping into territory he'd avoided his entire adult life. "I'm saying that somewhere between rustlers and ruined kitchens, I found something worth staying for." The ranch, her voice held a note of hope and uncertainty. "The woman who runs it." He took her hand, feeling its strength and delicacy simultaneously. "I can't promise we'll save Circle P, but I can promise you won't face Wheeler or anyone else alone again." For a long moment she was silent, her eyes searching his for any sign of reservation or pity. Finding none, she squeezed his hand. "I never expected this. After Thomas died, I thought that part of my life was over." "So did I, the part where I allowed myself to care deeply about anything or anyone." He smiled ruefully. "You proved me wrong on that count." "What changed?" "You did," he said simply. "Your courage, your resilience, the way you fight for what matters instead of running when things get difficult." The next morning brought Wheeler as predicted, his sympathy as false as his smile. He found Madeleine and Liam surveying the damage together, making plans for repairs. "Mrs. Radcliffe, I was devastated to hear about the fire," Wheeler began, hat in hand. "These old ranch houses, so vulnerable to accidents." "Curious how these accidents started right after your last visit," Liam observed. Wheeler's eyes narrowed slightly as he registered Liam's protective stance beside Madeleine. "I don't believe we've been formally introduced, Mr. Prescott." "Liam Prescott." "Mr. Prescott is my foreman," Madeleine said, "and a trusted advisor on all ranch matters." Wheeler's assessment shifted, recognizing Liam now as someone to be reckoned with rather than dismissed. "I see. Well, Mr. Prescott, I assure you Western Territorial operates entirely within the law." "Of course you do," Liam replied evenly, "just as Mrs. Radcliffe operates entirely within her rights to defend her property against trespassers and saboteurs. Accusations without proof are dangerous, Mr. Prescott. So is arson, Mr. Wheeler." The tension crackled between them until Madeleine stepped forward. "I assume you have business to discuss, Mr. Wheeler, other than expressing your condolences." Wheeler composed himself, "Indeed. In light of recent events, my company is prepared to make a final offer for Circle P, including assuming the mortgage and providing enough capital for you to resettle comfortably." "The price?" Madeleine asked, though her tone suggested the question was merely procedural. Wheeler named a figure so insultingly low that Liam had to fight to keep his expression neutral. "That's less than half the ranch's value," Madeleine observed calmly. "Given the condition of the property and the outstanding debt, it's generous," Wheeler countered. "I need your answer today, Mrs. Radcliffe. My employer's patience is exhausted." Madeleine straightened, the morning sun highlighting the proud set of her shoulders. "Then you may tell your employers that Circle P remains not for sale, Mr. Wheeler. Not today, not tomorrow, not 3 months from now when you hope to foreclose." Wheeler's facade cracked. "You're making a grave mistake. No bank will extend you credit now. Your house is in ruins, your operation barely functioning. What do you think will happen when winter comes?" "We'll manage," Liam interjected. "Circle P has faced worse and survived." Wheeler's gaze darted between them, noting something in their united front that seemed to disturb him. "I wasn't aware the ranch had acquired a partner." "There are many things you're not aware of, Mr. Wheeler," Madeleine replied, "including how far people will go to protect what they love." After Wheeler departed, his threats barely veiled, Liam and Madeleine faced the daunting task of rebuilding with severely limited resources. The coming months would test their resolve and ingenuity to the breaking point, yet something fundamental had changed. Where once Madeleine had shouldered her burdens alone, now she and Liam worked in tandem, drawing strength from each other's resilience. They began with the ranch house, salvaging what could be saved and rebuilding what couldn't. Neighbors helped families who'd faced Wheeler's tactics themselves and understood the importance of standing together against such predation. The territorial marshal, alerted to the pattern of sabotage, increased patrols in the area. Through it all, Liam and Madeleine's relationship deepened. Working side by side, sharing meals at the end of exhausting days, planning strategies to save the ranch, they formed a partnership that transcended conventional courtship. Their connection was forged in crisis, tempered by shared purpose and strengthened by mutual respect. One evening, as they sat on the newly rebuilt porch, Madeleine shared news that changed everything. "I received a letter from James's school today," she said, her expression a mixture of joy and anxiety. "He's asking to come home for Christmas." Liam felt a surge of protectiveness. "Is it safe?" "Wheeler's men have been quiet lately, but—" "That's what I've been struggling with," she admitted. "Part of me wants him here desperately, the other part fears bringing him back to," she gestured at the still-recovering ranch. "To his home," Liam finished gently. "Madeleine, this place may be wounded, but it's healing, like all of us." She studied him in the fading light. "When did you become the optimist between us?" He laughed softly. "I believe the lady once lectured me about building from broken pieces." Her smile, rare and precious, warmed him more than the evening's mild temperature warranted. "James should know what we're fighting for," she decided, "and I need to see my son." As the date for James's arrival approached, Liam found himself increasingly nervous. The boy's acceptance would matter, not just for Madeleine's sake, but for the future Liam had begun to envision for himself at Circle P. The stagecoach arrived on a crisp December morning, bringing 10-year-old James Radcliffe home to a ranch he barely recognized after nearly 2 years away. Tall for his age, with his mother's chestnut hair and serious expression, he descended from the coach with the careful dignity of a child trying to act grown. "James," Madeleine called, her composure cracking as she rushed forward to embrace her son. Liam hung back, giving them space for their reunion. He watched as the boy's stiff posture melted into his mother's embrace, revealing the child beneath the practiced maturity. "The house looks different," James observed as they approached, his eyes taking in the new construction. "There was a fire," Madeleine explained carefully. "We've been rebuilding. James, I'd like you to meet Mr. Prescott. He's our foreman and a dear friend." Liam extended his hand to the boy, oddly anxious about the impression he would make. "Pleased to meet you, James. Your mother speaks of you often." James studied him with the frank assessment only children can manage. "Are you the one who helped fight the rustlers?" Surprised, Liam glanced at Madeleine, who shrugged. "I wrote to him about the ranch's challenges." "Your mother did most of the fighting," Liam told James honestly. "I just provided backup." This answer seemed to satisfy the boy, who nodded seriously. "Papa always said Mama was stronger than she looked." "Your father was a wise man," Liam agreed, feeling a strange connection to the man he'd never met but whose legacy shaped everything about Circle P. Over the following days, James reacquainted himself with the ranch, shadowing Liam through daily chores, asking endless questions about cattle and horses and the operation of the property. The boy's intelligence and genuine interest in ranching became increasingly evident, as did his protective instinct toward his mother. "Are you courting my mother?" James asked one afternoon as he helped Liam mend a bridle in the barn. The directness of the question caught Liam off guard. "What makes you ask that?" "The way you look at her when you think no one notices." James focused intently on the leather in his hands. "And the way she smiles more when you're around." Liam considered his answer carefully, respecting the boy's right to honesty. "I care for your mother very much, James. Whether that leads to courtship depends on many things, including how you might feel about it." James processed this with the seriousness of approach that reminded Liam so much of Madeleine. "Papa wouldn't want her to be alone forever," he finally said, "and I don't want that either." "No one could ever replace your father," Liam assured him. "I know that." The boy looked up, his expression earnest. "But maybe the ranch needs both of you to save it." The wisdom in the child's observation stunned Liam. Before he could respond, Silas burst into the barn, his expression grim. "Riders coming," the old foreman reported. "Wheeler and about a dozen men. They're armed." Liam's protective instincts surged. "James, go to the house, find your mother, and stay inside." The boy hesitated, clearly torn between obeying and wanting to help. "Go," Liam urged more gently. "Your mother needs you safe." As James ran toward the house, Liam and Silas gathered the ranch hands. They were outnumbered, but the element of surprise was gone. Wheeler's men would find no easy victory today. Wheeler's party halted at the edge of the yard, making no attempt to conceal their hostile intentions. Alongside the businessman rode his usual enforcers, supplemented by what appeared to be hired gunmen. "What's this about, Wheeler?" Liam called from the porch where he stood flanked by the Wilson brothers. Silas had positioned himself near the barn, rifle ready. "Termination of patience, Mr. Prescott," Wheeler replied coldly. "Mrs. Radcliffe has one final opportunity to accept our offer before we take more direct measures." "On my property with armed men," Madeleine's voice rang out as she emerged from the house, rifle in hand. She'd positioned James safely inside with instructions to stay away from windows. "That sounds like attempted robbery, not business." Wheeler's expression hardened. "The territorial court has granted our petition for immediate foreclosure. We're here to take possession, peacefully if possible." "That's impossible," Madeleine countered. "The hearing isn't scheduled until next month." "Emergency proceedings," Wheeler said smugly. "Given the deteriorated state of the property, the judge ruled in our favor." Liam and Madeleine exchanged glances, the same suspicion in both their minds, a bribed judge, a corrupt proceeding. "We'll need to see that court order," Liam demanded. One of Wheeler's men produced a document, which he held up but didn't offer to deliver. "You have 1 hour to collect personal belongings," Wheeler announced. The property and all assets now belong to Western Territorial Investments. The standoff might have escalated to violence then, had not the sound of approaching horses drawn everyone's attention. Around the bend in the road came Marshal Blackburn, accompanied by several deputies and, surprisingly, a distinguished-looking gentleman in Eastern attire. "That's enough, Wheeler," the marshal called. "Your court order isn't worth the paper it's written on." Wheeler's confidence faltered visibly. "This is a legal business matter, Marshal. You have no jurisdiction." "Fraud and conspiracy fall squarely within my jurisdiction," Blackburn countered. "As does judicial corruption." Judge Parker was quite shocked to learn he'd supposedly ruled on a case he's never heard. The Eastern gentleman urged his horse forward. "Perhaps I can clarify matters." Howard Chamberlain, president of First National Bank of Boston. He fixed Wheeler with a cold stare. "The bank that still legitimately holds Mrs. Radcliffe's mortgage, despite your company's claims to the contrary." Wheeler's face drained of color. "There must be some misunderstanding. Western Territorial purchased." "Purchased nothing," Chamberlain interrupted. "You forged documents, bribed officials, and attempted to seize property fraudulently. My bank takes a dim view of such practices, particularly when they target our valued clients." The revelation sent shockwaves through Wheeler's men, several of whom began to distance themselves from their employer, unwilling to risk prosecution for what they'd believed was legal, if underhanded, business. "Mrs. Radcliffe," Chamberlain continued, turning to Madeleine, "I must apologize for not responding sooner to your letters detailing these matters. Rest assured, your mortgage remains in good standing with us, and we are prepared to discuss more favorable terms given these extraordinary circumstances." The confrontation ended with Wheeler and his primary conspirators under arrest, the hired men dispersing quickly once they realized they'd been duped into participating in criminal activity. As the dust settled, Madeleine, Liam, and James stood on the porch, watching the marshal lead the prisoners away. Chamberlain remained, having accepted their invitation to stay for dinner and discuss the ranch's financial future. "How did this happen?" Madeleine asked, still dazed by the sudden reversal of their fortunes. "My letters to the bank went unanswered for months." Chamberlain looked slightly embarrassed. "They were intercepted, I'm afraid. It was only when young James wrote directly to me, as an old friend of his grandfather's, that I became aware of the situation." Liam and Madeleine both turned to James in astonishment. "You wrote to Mr. Chamberlain?" Madeleine asked her son. James nodded, suddenly shy under their scrutiny. "At school, they taught us about business correspondence. I remembered Papa mentioning Mr. Chamberlain was his father's friend from college, so I found his address and wrote to him about the ranch." He hesitated. "Was that wrong?" Madeleine gathered her son into a fierce embrace. "That was brilliant, James. Absolutely brilliant." Over dinner, Chamberlain outlined a new financing arrangement that would secure Circle P's future, a lower interest rate, extended terms, and the possibility of additional investment to expand operations. "The bank has always believed in the potential of Western Territories," he explained. "What we don't believe in is the underhanded consolidation tactics firms like Western Territorial employ. We prefer to see family ranches thrive." Later that evening, after James had gone to bed exhausted but happy, and Chamberlain had retired to the guest room, Liam and Madeleine found themselves alone on the porch, contemplating the stars and the remarkable turn of events. "Your son saved the ranch," Liam observed, still amazed by the boy's initiative. "Our future," Madeleine agreed softly. "James secured our future." The word hung between them, future, with all its implications and possibilities. "Madeleine," Liam began, turning to face her, "when I came to Circle P, I was a man determined never to put down roots, never to risk caring too deeply about anyone or anything." "I remember," she said, her voice gentle in the darkness. "You changed that, you and this land and that remarkable boy inside." He took her hands in his. "I don't want to be your foreman anymore." She stilled. "What do you want to be?" Your husband, James's stepfather. A true partner in building something that lasts. The words so long feared now flowed easily. I love you, Madeleine. I want to build a life here with you, with James, with whatever future we create together. In the moonlight, he could see tears glistening in her eyes. Are you certain? Once upon a time, you told me attachment was a weakness out west. I was wrong, he said simply. What I've learned from you is that love isn't weakness, it's the strength that carries us through the worst the frontier can deliver. Your love for this land, for your son, for the dream you shared with Thomas, it never broke you, it made you fight when anyone else would have surrendered. And now, she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Now I want to fight alongside you, not just against men like Wheeler, but for something, for our home. For our family, he paused, if you'll have me. Her answer came not in words, but in the way she stepped into his embrace, her lips finding his in the darkness. The kiss held the promise of all they'd survived and all that awaited them, the struggles and joys of building a life together on the frontier they both loved. Spring came to Circle P with renewed vigor. The house stood fully restored, the cattle thrived, and the future that had once seemed so precarious now stretched before them with promise. On a perfect May morning, beneath an arch of wildflowers in the ranch yard, Liam Prescott and Madeleine Radcliffe exchanged vows before family, friends, and neighbors. James stood proudly beside them, his role in both the ceremony and their lives acknowledged by all. I once believed the frontier was no place for love, Liam said as they stood together afterward, watching their guests celebrate. That attachment was a weakness I couldn't afford. Madeleine smiled up at him, radiant in her simple wedding dress, and now I know better, he drew her close, their rings catching the sunlight. What I thought was weakness became our greatest strength. Together, we built something neither of us could have created alone. From across the yard, James waved to them, his young face alight with the joy of witnessing his mother's happiness and the security of knowing Circle P would remain his heritage, now strengthened by the man who had chosen to stand beside them both. In the distance, the land stretched toward the horizon, challenging, beautiful, and full of possibility, no longer a place to pass through, but a place to build upon. No longer a territory of isolation, but the foundation of a family's legacy. The widow's weakness, which had never truly been weakness at all, had indeed become their collective strength. And the cowboy who had once feared to stay now found himself exactly where he belonged, standing not just by her side, but as an essential part of the future they would forge together.